up, everybody, and welcome to another episode of The Art of Being You. And we continue our relationship series. Guess what, you guys? It is Valentine's Day, so happy Valentine's Day to everybody out there. Galentine's Day is the new thing that's happening now with all the ladies. But it was really interesting that number one, we hadn't had time to do any other episodes, and it's just been one thing after another. And funny enough, today we got into the topic of vulnerability and intimacy in relationships, which is perfect for today's holiday that I know people are celebrating all over the world. But it was awesome because it fits so perfectly. And funny enough, we'll share, a little bit of our story of how we had a date. We don't really celebrate Valentine's Day as much now as before. I think before, when we were dating, I think it was a little bit more like a must. Like, we have to celebrate it and give gifts and all that good stuff. And I think now, I think we just kind of, our Valentine's Day is like every day. I think we do pretty well in like appreciating each other, right?
That sounds so cheesy.
Rude.
And what is Galentine's Day?
It's like for single girls, like it's for friends, like gals, like they send each other gifts, or they do like a get together and they watch a movie and they like, whatever. Everybody does a little bit something different, but I thought it was really cool. I was like, yes, girls, that's what I'm talking about.
Okay. I thought that's what girls did anyway.
This is very true. So let's get into this topic, which I found very interesting because we were going to separate. It was one episode dedicated to vulnerability and another one really dedicated to intimacy. And funny enough, it just kind of, they go hand in hand. And so I thought it would be best to bring up this topic together and see your thoughts on it. So one thing that I read in an article that I found super interesting was, within a relationship, it is necessary to be vulnerable in order to build intimacy with your partner. I didn't realize how really the two topics go hand in hand. And it stated, like, being vulnerable in a relationship means allowing your partner to know you fully. So this is talking about thoughts, feelings, challenges, weaknesses, without judgment. I think that's the key on that. What do you think?
Yeah, without the judgment is really important, because otherwise you wouldn't feel safe enough to be vulnerable. If you felt you were going to be judged, you would hold back. You wouldn't allow yourself to be vulnerable, would you?
No, but like, for example, at the beginning of relationships, you always do hold back. Like, because there's really no, you're trying to like test the boundaries of, is it safe? And something just kind of, at some point, you just do it knowing that there's a risk that they may judge you. But I think it also depends how ready you are, and also the baggage that you come with. Because I feel a lot of this has to do with, if you've been burned before and you've had like a traumatic experience where you've opened up and they judged you, or something really horrible happened, you didn't feel heard or understood, you're more than likely not going to do that again, or you're going to be a little bit more careful of how you do it.
Yeah, I'd say at the start of a relationship, you're both feeling your way out to see, you obviously understand that you like them, but how much do you have in common, and how much you trust them. And I think the trust part is built up over time, and then as that continues, you then make a decision, okay, this person is okay for me to be vulnerable around. And that's something that happens over time. I don't think it happens overnight. And then, there's lots of different factors associated with that, in terms of the vulnerability that you want to demonstrate.
I think, honestly, you're right. And it is a process, because I think you have phases of it. Like, at the beginning, you share certain things, and then as the relationship is growing and progressing, it really shows how much you can like add to it, and then you open up a little bit more, and then you open up a little bit more, and then as the relationship grows and continues, I think it's a never-ending sort of process.
Sorry, yeah, I was going blank there. But also what you said around the baggage and the issues and everything, that will determine how long it takes for you to trust, I imagine. If you've had terrible experiences before, or you know, for example, someone's cheated on you, then you go into the next relationship thinking it's inevitable that the next person might cheat on you, because that's the last reference point you've had for a relationship and it was very bad. So if that's the case, you might not want to show any vulnerability because you don't have any trust. So that might take a lot longer for someone if they have a lot of baggage or bad experiences, dishonesty, etc. They might not feel the need to be vulnerable. They might just want to see how it goes and take their time, but that can equally work against them, because if you're not vulnerable at some stage, the other person in theory will want to get to know you, all your deepest, darkest secrets, as it were, to take the relationship to the next level. And if you're not open to doing that, that's where you might hit like a roadblock.
Oh, yeah, this is very true. In my experience, I think because I started dating at such a late age, one, because my parents are super strict and very conservative, I didn't start dating until super late. So, and then especially growing up in a small town, I feel like I was a little bit more naive. Like any guy I met, I was like, oh my God, he's really nice. And then it turned out that they were not. And in my experience, like all the first kind of experiences that I had as boyfriends, which crazy enough were like a bunch of musicians always, for whatever reason. They all obviously, like, I mean, I'm not trying to dig on like musicians, but they all cheated. And I think that programmed me to not open up. Like I was used to like, oh, okay, I can't trust. And so I wouldn't open up until way later in a relationship, which actually normally wouldn't even turn into a relationship, would just stay in the dating phase. But I didn't really know how to open up or like fully trust unless somebody was a friend first. So then I like, oh, they're really good friends. And then you kind of, it's easier to open up because there's no expectation. Like from a friend, you really don't have any expectation. So it's easier to, you know, if they judge you or whatever, there's nothing else that you really say with that, right?
I don't know. You're asking from your side, your experience. Yeah, I've not had that experience, so I don't know what to say there in terms of a friend and then it developing into more and you having that trust. So it makes sense, but yeah, not something that I've experienced.
So then what did you experience?
I wasn't vulnerable until I met you, I don't think. Properly. But that's because I had a massive ego.
Let's talk a little bit about that.
But that's the truth. You couldn't see a weakness. You couldn't see vulnerability because I didn't want to portray that. I was trying to fulfill a role that I'd designed in my head that was not sustainable in work, in life, in everything. I was extremely competitive with everyone and I had a big ego. I had to be the best. I had to, you know, so on and so forth. So yeah, there was no way I wanted to show any vulnerability. I think I probably showed maybe some in my first relationship. That didn't go very well, and then I didn't do that again. And it's only until I met you, and our relationship was a total whirlwind, and nothing I'd allowed. You know, I wouldn't believe if you told me that it would have happened. And so that's the next point. I actually opened up and all the rest of it. But a lot of things happened to get me there. It wasn't easy.
This is very true. So one thing that I will say is I was afraid to be vulnerable with you because you didn't show any sort of, you're right, like you didn't show any sort of like weakness or crack. And so when I wanted to, like, I wanted to tell you certain things, it was like, oh, should I not? Like, you portrayed such a tough person that then I started almost like mirroring that. And it was like, I had to be then like, oh, which is the whole incident of, like, I think in one of the previous episodes of, you know, when you, the article incident where I like lost, I was like, nope, I'm deleting this number. I cannot even be vulnerable with this guy. Like, he's gonna, no way. So that was like the one thing. But I will have to say, and I know you guys, we do not practice what we're going to say. It's just like freehand, whatever comes up. But I want to share, which you might not want to, but it's going to happen. The part where, you know, you're saying I was the first one that you were vulnerable with, but then you still questioned it because you said to me, this is like too good to be true. Mm-hmm. And you thought I was like a blogger and that I was going to, like that I was writing an article of kind of like how to lose a guy in 10 days because it was so good. And like you questioned it.
Yeah, but I think you have to give context to that, right? So our relationship started by a 15-minute encounter in a nightclub in Los Angeles. At this time, I was living in London, about to move to the Middle East, to Dubai. And we literally spoke for 10-15 minutes. You left, you had work the next day. I was on holiday. And then we sort of entered a long-distance relationship. Our next date was in Las Vegas, Cheesecake Factory. The next day after that was Dubai. Then it was London. And then our first Valentines was in New York. And then one more date in Los Angeles, and we then moved in together in the Middle East, in Dubai. So I had never had a long distance relationship before. I'd never even contemplated it, and it was going so well that it did, and that maybe that's why the way I'm programmed to think that it's too good to be true, therefore it wouldn't, it mustn't work, or it's gonna fall apart or something. And then I started to question what on earth was going on in my life. Like, how do you meet someone and it goes so well? Because that's not what I was used to. I was used to working hard for things, or that's the way I was programmed. And so for something to connect and be as easy, it seemed bizarre. So yeah, I started to concoct stories in my head about how this was not real or whatever. And that, I think, there you have me wrestling with my ego. Should I be vulnerable with this lady, or is she trying to stitch me up? And I don't know, is she out for her own benefit or whatever? And that's where I got to with that, before deciding or understanding that no, it was the real thing. And 5 years later, we've been married a few years, and all the rest of it. So yeah, that's why that went down that path.
So this leads me to, you said something about connection, and I think when people think of intimacy, I think the first thing is like sex, right? But it actually, intimacy really is about connection and it's closeness. So it involves emotional and physical. Like, I feel like a lot of people think of intimacy and immediately they think of sex, but it's not. It's both. It's an emotional connection. It's that closeness that once you open up, then you learn to accept all parts of someone when it comes to intimacy, because the good, the bad, the ugly, and you like learn to like accept it all.
I think that's you could talk to different people, and I think some would say the connection part is the hardest part. Some would say the sexual part is not even intimacy for them. It's just a physical act, and that there's a one night stand, for example, or whatever else. So intimacy isn't that for them, although other people would say the absolute opposite, and they have to achieve the full level of intimacy mentally before they can do anything physical. So I think it varies across the spectrum with different people. But generally, I imagine, from my experience and the people I've met and spoke to, sort of on this topic, it's the mental part. It's being vulnerable and allowing that deep connection to create that intimacy where you show everyone everything. Show someone everything: your faults, your failures, your flaws, your deep secrets that you haven't shared with anyone else. That level of connection and intimacy is can be extremely scary and challenging to achieve with people.
So speaking on that, which I think is really good if we shared with people some tips to help them come up with how to kind of look at this as a whole and do it with like strategy. And the reason I say this, and just recently, and I posted this on my Instagram, and I cannot remember the lady's handle, but her story is, she has like over 1 million followers or something like that. But point is, she works in finance, and she had opened up to her fiance. So they were already engaged to get married. She opened up to her fiance about her eating disorder, and he left her. And from her, obviously her devastation, she started, she started therapy, but 2, she started doing interior design, like makeovers for families on the weekend to help her cope. And as I was looking at like the tips to share with the audience, I thought, oh my gosh, this falls in line perfect with that scenario, because somebody may not be equipped to, some people may just accept you when the good times, when the good things are there. And then when the moment that there's challenges or there's a weakness, they're like, I can't handle this, bye. And they like check out. A lot of guys do. I mean, not a lot. I will say, I don't want to be like biased, but a lot of guys ghost girls, like when they don't know how to handle certain things.
Girls do that too.
Okay. Not my experience, but.
Yeah, one, that's pretty heartless, your example there. But 2, yeah, I'm sure she was taking a leap of faith there to share something that was obviously a huge problem for her, challenge, and being engaged with that person, she must have felt there was a level of trust that it would be dealt with in a very different way, and that's her being vulnerable, and then it backfiring, unfortunately. But then obviously that's the wrong at least you've got the information there that it's the wrong partner, so maybe he did her a favor.
This is very true. So let's start with one of the tips. So we have 5 tips for you guys. The first one is asking yourself why you can't open up with that certain person. Like, you have to understand, why is it that I cannot open up even though I want to, but I can't? And I think that's a question that even for me, I would say it was due to my past experiences. Like, I knew that either I changed that and I allowed this to be a new experience, or I brought all the baggage with me and continued to do the same thing.
Number 2, work out your feelings first before opening up. If a relationship is fragile and not safe, journaling or speaking to someone, a coach or a counselor, could help. That's a very good tip, because if you can share it once your emotions are stable in your own mind, it will come across a lot better to someone else.
Oh, definitely. And I think that kind of helps with even the communication style. And I'm sure with journaling, it kind of lets it come out. And then, not that you need to share it in that moment with that person, but you journaling it really helps you just kind of start the process of, how do I do this? And getting a coach, I think, would be really helpful to handle some of these situations. I know for me, that definitely worked, is getting a coach, because she kind of helped me with, are you going to do the same thing? Is this something that you want to start fresh? Like, there was all these questions that triggered my action plan after that. So that's really good. So number 3 is practice with smaller things. So like, if being vulnerable is hard, or being intimate is hard, is it because you've been burned before? So you have to practice with smaller things. So expressing your emotions and what you're actually thinking. So maybe you don't start like deep, 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 but you kind of give a little bit like, I don't really like that restaurant, or, it makes me feel a certain way when you talk about your ex, or, something that you could start small with and that you can handle, just to kind of get an idea of how you yourself end up coming across.
Okay. Number 4, sorry. Be honest with your partner about your struggles. Is there something he or she can do to make you feel safe? So I think that's very good, and I think the biggest thing there for me is around the trust. So if I were to tell you something that was made me feel uncomfortable, and I was being vulnerable with you, I'm giving that to you almost to look after. Then if you went and spoke to your friends about it, or you brought it up in a public forum, which Nancy loves to do, by the way. She there's some house secrets that aren't house secrets. They get out, but luckily we deal with that and move on. But it's knowing what you need to respect and keep within the relationship, and that building that trust will help. So it's a two-way street. That one, the person is honest and talks openly, but then the second person respects it and understands there's a trust there that shouldn't be broken.
This is very true, but to help me out a little bit here, you don't tell me that it's stuff that I need to keep in the house. So I think it's a free-for-all. So I think it's funny stories, and then I just share them, and then all of a sudden I get the look of death, and then that's when I realize, whoops, that was one of those things I shouldn't have said anything. But all is good, folks. We learn as we go. And the last tip is ask for what you need. So this is a really good one. So sometimes it's not about, like, when you share something with somebody, it's not about fixing, like, you're not telling them so that they can fix the problem or so that they can solve it. It's more about the connection part. It's not about, a resolution, like, here, I'm telling you this because I need you to find a solution. It's more of just to build the connection with you that I'm sharing, whatever it is. And I think for the person who's listening, especially if you're a fixer, like if you love problem solving and fixing, which I think you are, it's really hard to share. So then, like, for myself, I'll keep information or things that are bothering me because I know that once I tell you, you turn into like the research Google king.
Yeah, this is true. I like to try and solve problems, and I have got crazy Nancy out of herself, because she screams and shouts at me when she just wants to share something and doesn't want me to resolve it straight away. She just wants me to listen. So that's definitely something I've learned over time.
So that's something. So I'm going to end with just a question for you. At what point in the relationship, now today's Valentine's Day, so I will say on Valentine's Day, that our first year when we were in New York, I think that was probably one of the harder. We had a lot more fun because then it's like the walls were down. Like, I feel like you get to enjoy. We had already said I love you, right?
Yes.
Which, by the way, Matthew said first. Just had to throw it out there. Props to you, babe. That was something that it made celebrating love a lot easier, and handling the vulnerability and the intimacy as far as the connection. The conversations that we had from the very beginning kind of set the stage for the relationship. And that was like, from the beginning, we were both very, very clear on what we wanted and what we were looking for in a relationship. And that really helped kind of set the stage on the type of conversations that led after that. which was something different that I had never done before. I think before it was always like, I'll just say what I think they want me to say. And then that way, or I'll pretend like I'm this strong superwoman that never needs anything. And then they'll love that. And that wasn't the case. I think with you, that was the one thing that I learned that I could share as a tip is set the stage from the beginning. And if you already are in a relationship, have that conversation with your partner and check in, because I think after a while, your visions may change. And so that's something that it's really nice that I think was one of the very first questions that you asked me that I thought, wow, I have never had a guy that I'm dating ask me that question, which was, what is your vision? Like, what is it that you want for your life, for yourself, for like you in a relationship, like as in a family? And you really asked me those questions, and I couldn't like lie about it. It was just, it felt so nice to just share it. And that was something that I think set the stage for like the rest of the relationship, because it wasn't like these surface conversations. It really truly was about connection.
Yeah, and we had more on the line though, right? Because, well, I say more on the line, but living 16-hour flight away from each other and all the rest of it. And one of us going to have to give up everything to move either way, it was important to understand if what we wanted out of life aligned. Because if it didn't, it's better to find out very early, so we don't put the other person in a position where they quit everything and it doesn't necessarily work out when we could have just asked the questions at the start. So that's kind of what drove that, or where that came from. But in terms of the conversations and New York and everything, but it was I think it was easier this time around, because one, we're both in our mid-30s at that point, so we have a
age has nothing to do with this.
we both have a bit more experience in life, I guess, and understand a bit more clearly what we do and don't want. And we created the safe space where we could vocalize it in the relationship. But why was it important that I said I love you first? Is that you not being vulnerable and a little bit of your ego coming in there?
Obviously. Yes, that was I think it goes back to roles, like when my mom would say, you cannot call a boy, like he has to call first, or he has to show interest first, and then you can, I think that was obviously playing in the background. But yeah,
I think roles, actually, something we haven't mentioned, is very, very important, probably if we're wrapping up here. But as a man, if you aren't the protector or the provider, etc., or whatever role you have in your head as being a man, and then you have to be vulnerable and share 50% of the baggage or the, whatever it is with your partner, maybe that goes against the construct in your head of what it looks like to be a man. So maybe then you don't want to be vulnerable, and that impacts you. And I think from the other side, from the female's perspective, I guess it's receiving any vulnerability that you get from your partner, again using the male and female relationship dynamic, and how you treat that. If I tell you I'm scared of a horror movie and you mock me, which you do, which you do continually, but I'm not really scared. But no, if you give some information that, one, could be used against you, and two, shows your vulnerability, so now all of a sudden you're not this big strong man or the role that you envisaged yourself playing in the relationship, you won't be vulnerable again, because if it's used against you, and it then impacts your view of the world. My view of the world is a man is this in the relationship. Now, if you don't let me be this, then I can't be in the relationship. You create arguments and all the rest of it. So the roles have to be, you have to be sensitive towards them. It's not that they have to be, they have to be fluid, because at some stage, as a man, you need to break out of that toxic masculinity and the such. But again, it might take time. So you need the support and the understanding of your partner as you go through that journey. Because I think that's a lot of it, and that's probably why my ego and everything else got in the way previously, and why it didn't. Because I had a lot of learning to do and a lot of experience to gain before I got there. And the right partner helped go through the end of that journey to a point where I could speak openly and feel safe in the relationship.
But I think that also has to do with the title. Like, for example, as you were saying that, I'm like, wait a minute, women go through that as well. Because, for example, I'll give my own example, and I know a lot of other women and clients have gone through this, is when you are labeled the independent woman, you have more of a male energy. You know what I mean? Like, instead of being the feminine, typical, the way that a woman is supposed to be, like, I took on a very male dominant energy where I was like, no way do I need to be vulnerable. Like, because he's going to hurt me, and I will not allow that. And that was like, so I think for a lot of women that fall into that, again, the role, the title, whatever that is letting go of all of that. And the whole point of all of that is both of you putting the ego to the side, the titles and the, the I am this and I'm not that, putting it to the side, and then being able to just be you at the end of the day.
Yeah. And that's it. And that's, if you feel the support and you feel the safety to do that, that's when, but also you need to be going into a relationship or, in the relationship, be given the space to figure out who you are, because a lot of people don't get that. And I go back to our age, like the maturity, the age and everything. And also, as you say, your coach. I had a coach. I had a counselor for many years, and still do. Without that, we probably wouldn't have got to the healthy position we're currently in.
Agreed. So, all right, guys, we're wrapping up here. Hopefully the tips were helpful in some way, shape, or form, and even just the stories where you may be able to resonate with some of it. But if not, share with us your stories. I think I would love to hear what other people are experiencing as far as what they think about vulnerability and intimacy in relationships. But we will see you guys in the next episode. We're actually wrapping up on the relationship series here, a few more episodes and we're finished. So it's like bittersweet. We're like past the halfway mark. But listen in, let us know any feedback. If there's any topics that you guys want to cover, definitely let us know. Keep us posted. Share any of this info, and we will see you guys later.